be looking into additional options that can get us a richer video for the balance of the session.
Okay, should we start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here, Mohammed. No, you.
No, I
you
probably
don't
will
need
be
this.
using this one. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nate. So for this part of the session, it's Nate provided all the theoretical background and all the discussions in the first session, and right now I was planning to be a bit more hands-on, and we can start by. So the goal for this session, the next one, and most of the morning tomorrow is to basically set up a study and create a few surveys with that and make sure that we feel comfortable with the interface. So this happens for today, and then I hope that everyone, I create a study here and I ask you guys to create your study on the website as well, just as I do it here. And but as you do it, please also join as a participant in the study that I create. So by tomorrow we have some data collected, and we discuss more what these data are and how they look like tomorrow morning. And when it comes to the analysis on the third day, we hopefully can look at the data that we have collected for these 2 days. So I will create this study here, but please also you can create your own on your machines. And if there's any questions, please interrupt and ask. So there are two account types in Ethica that we divide users that register into two groups. They're either participants or researchers. And when you're signing up on the website, you have to just make sure that you create an account as a researcher in order to be able to set up the study. If you join with the app, it by default assumes you're a participant. And as a participant, of course, you can join the study, and you can either use the Ethica app on the smartphone or on the website. But you cannot start a new study or join other studies as researchers, or of course access data collected by other participants. And if you join as a researcher, you can start a new study, you can invite other researchers to join your study, or you can join other people's studies. That's why the study that I will create, I'll make sure I add all of you to have access to that as well. And you can access the identified data from participants. That's what we plan to do tomorrow and the after tomorrow. As the data comes in, we will be looking at the data and how they look like. You can monitor and manage the study progress and participation. But you cannot participate in the study, of course, if you have a researcher account, even for testing it. So this is not possible. And you cannot use the app as with your researcher account, because the app is specifically for participants. So
So just to clarify that, Mohammed.
Yes.
I just thought I'd point out, it goes without saying that you can have, if you have a participant account separately, and you have a researcher account, you can participate in your capacity as a participant, just not as a researcher.
Yeah.
So it's not that a given person can only be one or the other, it's just that they have to engage using the right account for the purpose.
I was just about to say that one thing that I suggest is to create two accounts, one with your professional email address, like your institution email address, as the researcher account, and the other one with your personal email address as a participant account, so we can experience both. So when I ask for joining the study as a participant, you can use your participant account to log in and join the study. And I'm gonna do both. Right now, I'm just gonna register as a researcher. Then when we get to the app interface, I'll register as a participant. So for now, we just register as a researcher. If you go to the website and click on the login link up here. Oh, well, I'm already signed in. I have to probably sign out. Okay. Now back again to the home page. If you click on login, it takes you here. You can click sign up, and then I just I type name, and I already have created an account with my email address. I think I can use this email address and a password. Usually use this tool. And here I have to say I am a researcher down here. I'm not sure if it's visible. I can zoom in a bit here. Yeah. So here I can say I am a researcher and the affiliation. Oh. Okay, it says my password was not correct. Okay. Okay. Another try. Your password and confirm password was not identical. So I don't know. I'm using this auto password generator because I have to create a lot of passwords every time I sign up, but apparently it doesn't work. I'm just going to type a password here. Okay. I again have to specify I'm a researcher. This should, oh, you already have an account with this. Yeah, I suspected that. I use I have created a lot of accounts here, so that's why this email address is already taken. I just say to this. Okay, let's see. Okay, now, eventually I was successful. Add. Okay. So when you log in as a researcher, you can see that you don't have any study created yet. That suggests you that you can start by clicking on the Create Study button on the top left side, on the top left menu. But it also shows you a list of sample studies that we have created. The sample studies I think we started a few years ago, so they have a fair amount of data in them, but they are just I think with just me and Nate as participants, so you can check all of our data for the past few years. And the advantage is that it doesn't have any ethics restrictions, so we could freely share the data without being bound by the ethics board requirements. So to just give you a bit of a background on how the system works, we just signed in as a researcher, and now we just logged into the researcher dashboard as a researcher. When we create a study, basically a study is considered as a building block of Ethica. Everything that you want to do, you have to start first creating a study. And a study consists of data sources, which basically provides the sensor data or any other automated data that's collected from the participant throughout the study, the surveys that they respond, and any other activities that the participant have to do during the study. For example, we talked about ASA24. If we add that as an integration to the study, that's the activity that they have to do. The difference between the data sources and surveys and other activities is that the data sources are collected unobtrusively without participants' interaction with the system. They're automatically collected, whether through sensors or other digital footprint data. But surveys and other activities, they always require some sort of interactions with participants. So if it's survey, they have to respond to it. If it's an interface to enter their time use data, they have to do it through the app. If it's any sort of intervention based on their past data that we integrated with the app, they have to interact with that. If it's collecting a dietary recall via ASA24 or other platforms, they also have to interact with that. So they all fall under the other activities and surveys. But they all together, when they're bundled together, they form a study. And then when a participant joins, this bundle of all the details of the study is sent to whatever device they used to access the study, like to join the study, whether it's an iPhone device, an Android device, and the web-based app. And not all of the items that we set up in the study is available on all platforms. We discuss that later on as we go through these features. Depending on the device that they access, some of these data sources or some of these features are available or are not. Whatever is not available, a report is sent that for this participant, this type of data or this type of activity was not possible, so it's excluded. But the app still operates with whatever remaining feature that was possible to present. Now, we start by creating a new study here. Later on, we look at this, when we create a study, we look at these sample studies as well. But let's start by creating a study here. It's just a few short steps. We'll go through them. The first one is you have to pick a name. The name is better to be short. Actually, this, for example, Walk This Way is an example of a name that you can use for your study, or any other name that best describe your study. You have to be careful to pick a name that's short because we presented at a lot of different places in the app, and if the name is long, it will be ellipsized at the end, and it's hard to, well, it's not fully readable. Well, right now I just call it Bootcamp 2019 demo. Okay. For example, when participants want to join the study, this is the interface they see in the app, and you can see that the name is shown here. And if the name is actually long, well, it won't fit. So you need to keep it short and clear. The second step is to write down the materials for the consent form of the study. This is a bit, the term here is a bit misleading. Well, depending on your study design, you can assume that you can consider this as the implicit consent from the participants when they join. Or you might have your study set up in a way that you meet with participants first, you ask them to read a paper-based consent form, sign that paper-based consent form, and then, so this is just an information about what the study is. But overall, it's good to make sure that you cover these few points. That what's the purpose of the study? What is the potential risks or benefits to the participants? How the data will be handled? Who will have access to the data? How they can contact the study staff, and how they can withdraw if they want to do so. And you need to keep in mind that people will read it on a very small screen. So if you add long text, it's probably hard to read. There is a hard limit on that. I think it's 6,000 words, and that seems a very long limit. But we had a lot of cases that people would copy and paste the entire consent form from the ethics board in this, and then when it wanted to load in the phone, and the phone would crash because it couldn't show all of this in just one long page. So it can't be more than 6,000 words. And that's already a lot. It has to be actually less than 500 or so. But it's a good practice to include a video describing the project. As I said, the content can be different based on the enrollment strategy. If you plan to meet with every person individually, you can ask, basically then this can be just an information about the study. If you want, to use this as actual consent form and you don't want to meet with every participant individually, especially if the sample size is larger, you basically have to make sure that the ethics application approves the content that you put here, and you consider that as their consent.
Mohammed, quick question. You may have mentioned this, but can you insert a link in this? Or
You can insert a link, and when I said it's a good practice to include a video, it's actually like you can put a link to a video here, which if they tap, they can watch, and then they can come back and continue here. Yeah, but you can put any URL. Though I think there is a limitation that URL has to start with HTTPS to be a secure URL. Increasingly, platforms don't allow HTTP. So if you just host it on your own website and it doesn't use the secure protocol, it might not, but when people tap on it, the URL might not work.
So the mechanisms which you might show later for including like HTML content for surveys, basically you can use the same type of mechanism to insert like a link, HTML here to have a link to an external video.
Yeah, and actually right now we can, the content of the consent form will go here. We can also just pick, please watch. We can also put a video here, watch this video if, for more details. One good practice that actually we use when we get to surveys, we describe how you can include multimedia, including pictures and videos in the survey. It's one good practice just to upload the video on YouTube, keep it as unlisted so it's not accessible by others, and then you can just provide that link here. I don't have a YouTube video link here, but well, I'm not gonna go there right now. I always get distracted when I go to YouTube and start watching other stuff. So, okay. Okay, so assume that this is the consent form. Now, the next step. So that's pretty much, that's the first step. The next one is a bit more, the form seems simple, but it has some pieces that you need to pay attention to. Here you specify that when the participants join, for how long they should be part of the study and how long the app should collect data from them. Basically the study, the participation timeline. There are two items you specify here. One is the study period and one is the participation duration. The study period basically says when the study should start and when it should end. Not when how long you need to collect data from each participant, but when it starts, when it ends. You can, if you have a hard deadline for finishing the project, you can specify it here. If there is no hard deadline, well, you just intend to enroll, for example, I don't know, like 100 participants or 500 participants, you can say it as open-ended, then the study can continue indefinitely. Participant duration is more important. You need to specify how long every participant will be part of the study. I'll give you a few examples here. One of them is that assume that you have a single cohort. So for example, there is there's a course that you want to enroll every student in that course to join the study. And you want all of them to be in that study from the time that the course starts to the time that the course ends. In this case, you, for example, can set the study period to be from September 1st to December 28th. That's going to be the term that the course is happening. And you can set the participation duration to be the same as the study period. It automatically says, so it's going to be 120 days. In this case here, I just listed a few examples that how the system automatically calculates the participation period for every participant. If they join before the study start time, it automatically assumes that their data collection should start on that date. So for example, you can provide the link and say, well, as soon as you register in the course, you can join the study as well, but no data is collected until September 1st. If they join on September 1st or any day before that, still their start date will be September 1st. If they join after September 1st, for example, September 12th, that date will be their start time, and the data collection happens for all of them on December 28th. So that's the last date. So their potentially participants can be part of the study for shorter number of days depending on when they join the study. Either it's going to be 120 days if they join on or before that date, or it can be less. For example, in this case, going to be like 108 days. The other case is that if you want to do a rolling enrollment, in this case, you probably don't have a specific deadline. If you don't, you can just mark it as open-ended. And then you can say, I want every participant to be part of the study for 15 days. So not the same as the study period. In this case, for example, if they join on March 1st, their start date is March 1st and goes until March 15th. If it's March 5th, goes March 19th, and March 7th, March 21st. One pitfall I've noticed that we have to find a way to make sure it's more clear on the website is that when it says 15 days, it's exactly 15 days, 15 times 24 hours. And some people assume that it's 15 days, so on the 15th day, they can also schedule surveys for the rest of the day as well. But for example, here, if on March 1st they joined at 10 a.m., on March 15th, the study ends at 10 a.m. as well. And so they can't schedule anything after 10 a.m. on that date. And we get a lot of questions that, oh, on 15th date, we had this survey scheduled at 8 p.m. and the participant didn't receive it. Why? So you just have to make sure that if you need 15 full days, you probably have to set it to be 16 days or something. Okay, we'll talk about the other enrollment cases, but just for here, we can assume that the study is not open-ended because today we start on June 24th, and although I would love to, but I don't think if we still gonna be here on 28th, so we can say it on 26th to be the last day, and it's gonna be the same as the study period. So as you join, when you join as a participant here, everyone's study will finish on 26th, at the end of the 26th. And we can say the target sample size here is, I hope all of you will join, so let me count. There's like, say 20. So this system, it doesn't cover all cases. For example, if there are two very common ones. The first one, if you have a control and intervention group, and you want to have a different study plan for them. If the study period is same for both control and intervention group, you can use still the same study, that one study, and just adjust parts of the study, adjust data sources, adjust the activities that they have to do, depending on whether they specify they are part of the control or intervention group. So still just one study will work. We'll see how. But if you have a different data collection period or participation period for control and intervention group, you probably will need to create, it should be managed manually. You basically need to create two studies. And this is the shortcoming of the system that we hope we can work on it soon. One thing that also will need multiple studies to be created is that if you have seasonal or phases of data collection. For example, it's a longitudinal studies, you plan to collect data for 3 months this year, 3 months next year, and so on. This is also not completely supported yet. For this, you have to create one study for every episode of data collection, every season of data collection. Makes it a bit challenging, but that's so far the best way we can handle this. Okay. And the last section here, enrollment type, specifies basically who can join the study. You can say whether it's closed, means that at the moment no one can join. Still, if anyone is part of the study, it doesn't impact their data collection. You can say to be invitation only, then only those who you invite to the study can join. If you want to strictly control who will be part of the study, or you want to ahead of time specify whether the participant is part of the control or intervention group, or if you want to, for example, adjust, one of the things that we'll do is that we will set up the study to use beacons as well. And if you want to program the beacons ahead of time, it's better to mark it as invitation only, so you can set up their accounts beforehand. Or it can be public, so anyone can join the study, of course, as long as the study period hasn't finished it. Yes?
Can you elaborate on what you meant by beacons?
We'll talk a lot about that, and yeah, if it's okay, I can talk about it in probably like half an hour. So the plan is that we set up this study and make sure that we will we will configure it to collect all data sources, including beacons. Beacons are small Bluetooth devices that usually they use, I think the biggest market for them is in the malls, that they attach to all the items that are in the shop, so they can detect if the item leaves the shop, and yet they can detect the proximity of people to those items as well. What we are using the beacons for is to detect participants' proximity to other participants or to any other object, basically in the physical world. So the goal of this study is to collect data on people's interactions, how often we spend time together. Of course, it's going to be most of the days for the next 3 days. And we hope that on the 3rd day we can see this contact graph within the data. So we set this one to be public. Okay. And here you basically have to add all the data sources that you want to monitor. I'm not going to talk about all the data sources that are here. That's basically both 2 morning sessions tomorrow. We'll go through them in details. But the few things you need to keep in mind is that okay, I can't. Not all data sources are available on all smartphone types. I don't say on all Android or iPhone, but on all smartphone types. Because, for example, of course, iPhone has the smallest subset of these data sources available, but even not all Android devices provide all these data sources. For example, when we talk about environmental data sources like ambient temperature or pressure sensor, not all Android devices come with these data sources as well. So you need to consider this when you are selecting a data source. If it's something not as common, like for example, like temperature sensor, you need to consider that if you're relying on participants' device to join the study, if participants are using their own devices, there is a chance that the data will not be available. You can also mark a data source to be optional or mandatory. There are a lot of things can happen in the phone for the data source to be disabled. For example, if you choose to collect location data with GPS, the participant can turn off their GPS. Some people just have the habit of keeping the GPS off for privacy, for saving battery. We will not be able to collect the data. If participant doesn't give us the permission, if for any reason the app is terminated, we will not be able to collect this data. We'll talk about how we can detect these cases. For all of those, we will send a notification to the participant that you are not providing this data. But you also can mark a data source as optional. If it's optional, it means that the participant can choose whether they want to provide it or not. If they don't want to, and they switch it off, we assume that they don't want to, and we don't notify them again about this. It's just, we just send a report that says participant opted out from providing this data. So that's helpful for bookkeeping, but that's pretty much it. Okay, so here for our study, as I promised, I'm going to add all the data sources that is supported. That's Bluetooth, Bluetooth beacons, now call logs and SMS logs to capture the, of course, phone calls that's made and text messages sent, app usage statistics, and screen time. There are some environmental sensors like ambient temperature, light, pressure, proximity, and relative humidity. There is no iPhone that is shipped with these devices, so it's going to be only available in Android. Most Android devices do have light sensor, but very few have the rest, like ambient temperature and humidity sensor. It's not really common for people to need a humidity sensor on their phone, I guess. And the location data is GPS and Wi-Fi. We'll talk about them tomorrow again. GPS is available on both Android and iPhone, but Wi-Fi is only Android. We'll see how we can use Wi-Fi both for detecting the contact patterns and also to detect the, have a better estimate on location, especially when they are indoor. Then the motion sensor data, accelerometer, and there are 8 of them. We will have a long discussion about them tomorrow. Actually, the motion sensor data, there is a redundancy on them. There's almost no case that you need to collect all 8 of these sensors. But here we are running a test study, so we can just include all 8 of them. Let me see. Yeah, and pedometer is the last one. And battery data. Here we list survey responses also as a data source, but even if I don't add it here, when I add a survey, it just manages it automatically. Okay. Now in the last page, there are a few settings to adjust here. The first one is the automatic data upload reminder. So how it works is that by default, it doesn't send any data upload reminder to participants, but you can configure the system to check the data that's expected to come from every participant. And if the data is not coming for a few days, it will send them a notification and say, well, to make sure that everything is working as expected. The options that we have here is very simple. We are working to make it a bit more smart and complex in detecting the data missing. The two options we have here, one is to send a reminder of after 0 days of inactivity. So for example, if they are, okay, I can say after, for example, 3 days. What this means is that if they are expected to upload sensor data and they don't send anything for 3 days, the system automatically sends them a message and say, well, we are expecting some data. Can you just tap on this message to make sure everything is okay? And when they tap on that message, the system will check everything to make sure it's working. The other option.
So, Mohammed, just to be, so people are clear, because they may not have seen it, that the data is normally uploaded without them needing to be involved with
Yes,
that.
I was hoping to talk about it a bit later, but we'll look at the participants, the app interface and how the data is being uploaded. But the latest, the data should be uploaded once every 1 hour. So basically, if it's 2 days and nothing has uploaded, there is it can be a sign that there is a problem. Either they're offline, they don't have internet connection, or they are online, but their app for some reason doesn't operate as expected. But the data is uploaded automatically without participants' interaction once every hour. Or you can say that if they are missing, if they were supposed to upload 5 survey responses and they didn't upload any yet, you can just send them a notification. So here we just say don't upload anything. The other one is the upload via Wi-Fi only option. By default, the app uses any network connection that it finds, whether it's data plan or Wi-Fi. But depending on the data sources that you have selected, it can be very expensive, especially if they are paying for their data. So you can choose this to say that default to upload via Wi-Fi only. Of course, participants can override this and change it for themselves. But if you choose this when they join the study, the data will be, by default, will be only uploaded via Wi-Fi.
And I think the other way works. Like if I don't select this, the participants have option to choose that. Okay, upload data Wi-Fi by Wi-Fi only.
The participants always have this option to change it.
Yeah.
But but there has to be a default value for that option. Here you can say what should be the default value. Whether the default should be, well, any connection, or the default should be either via Wi-Fi only. I have to say that there are 2 exceptions to this. One is that survey responses will be uploaded regardless on any connection that's found, but just the responses themselves, not the media files associated with them. So if you capture a video as part of your survey response, the video can be 200 megabytes. That will not be uploaded, but the survey response and the fact that you captured the video this long will be uploaded. And the other one is the report of the participants' interactions with the app. We will look at that report separately. The reason that these two are not following this rule is that it's really, really important to figure out like what's going on with the participant's device, especially when it comes to like making sure if there is a problem or not. And these 2 data really helps. And usually they're very, very small. Like I think they usually don't go over like 100 kilobytes or so. Yeah. And the last one is an image that you can pick here as the app's background, which will be used in any part of the app that we want to present a study similar to this one. Here I did have an image downloaded, probably it went to the desktop. Yes, okay. Upload this one, it's nice. You just have to search in Google because a lot of them comes up. Okay, I'm gonna press create the study. It takes a bit time depending on the data sources that you have chosen, because it sets up all the databases behind the scene and all the tables for that and so on. Now it takes you here. By default, I'm the only person who has access to this study, but I can invite any other researcher to join as well. I have to just tap here and add a new member, and then I have to enter the email address. For example, I don't know the email address that you have used to sign up, but if I knew, I could right now use this interface.
They're actually in a folder now.
Oh.
Or a sheet, Google Sheet. Do you want me to share it with you?
Yes, if you can, that would be very helpful.
Sure.
Where do you share? You'll email it to me. You'll message me.
I'll share it with you. Just one moment. It'll be.
Or
yeah,
I'll go to that tiny URL.
Well, we have all of them here.
I go to that tiny URL. You can share it there.
So it has just been shared with you in your email. Sure. I can.
Yeah, if you can put it there, I can
Sure.
add people one by one.
Sure. Okay. And
Yeah. So while you do that, one thing that's very important to mention here is that when you add someone to the study to have as part of the research team, they will have all the same permissions as you. We don't support different access levels. You can't say this person should only have access to this type of data. This person can have access to that type of data. So if you add a researcher, that person will also have full access permission on the study.
okay, Mohammed, it is in the.
Where is that?
It's one level up. Sorry. Sorry. It's called Participant Researcher Emails for Boot Camps.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
So those are all the.
Yeah, I can add Amira here as a researcher, as the first person. You can see the name appears here. Can add Priscilla here. And Megan. And Shrill. And Gimantha, I think this. Now, if you refresh your page, you should see the study in. Okay, so one thing that tells me is that Brianna has signed up as a participant. So if I add this, it just tells me that that Brianna has signed up as a participant, and I can't invite her to the list. The way that the system works, actually the division between participants and researchers accounts are so separate that we can't really convert one account to another type. So the only way to do it would be to delete the account and then start from scratch. Or you can alternatively just use another email address to sign up as a researcher. Yes.
So you create because I've been trying, so two of my both of the emails that I have in my life are on the Ethica, but I'm as a participant. So
Both of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we need to do is to delete the account, and then you can, and if you delete all the associated data with that account will be also removed, and then you can sign up as a researcher. Or you can use, there's a trick that we'll talk about it, how we can do that. You can use plus after your name and 01 or something. That becomes an alias of your email address. So that's still your email address, but it's an alias, the automatic alias.
So
Yeah.
I'll get a TA to work with.
Yeah.
Work on that.
So if you, Brianna, if you update the email address, I can add you to the list as well. But for now, if you refresh the page, you should see the name, the study in your study list as well. Okay. Before we go to study modification, any questions? Anything so far? So anything that we created for the study can be modified, from the enrollment types, data upload policy, adherence reminders, background data sources, surveys, and so on. Modifications become into they come into effect immediately for new participants, but it can take time to reach all currently enrolled participants. So if you don't have any participant in your study, it's very simple. You just modify it and stop. But if you do have participants in the study, it actually can get tricky. For the new participants, it applies to them immediately. But for the current participants, you just have to make sure that their device is updated with the changes. If they're online, it happens right away. But the problem is that you can't assume all the participants are online all the time. So if their device is offline, the app still should operate, and especially and it can get tricky to get their device updated. The other challenge here, I think I have a slide for that, is that if you modify the study, it can make the analysis more complex, because then you have, especially if you have participants enrolled, you have a set of participants who part of their participation, the study was one way, part of it was differently. We support versioning on surveys. So as you modify the survey, the version increases, and every time they respond, it has a tag that which version was that. But we don't do it for the studies yet. And it's generally very complex to see how we can version the study.
Sorry, just with the plus,
Mhm.
is that for Gmail?
That's for Gmail accounts, yes.
Okay, it's Gmail accounts, and you put it plus and then something at gmail.com.
Plus and a number and at gmail.com.
Yeah.
So yeah, here if you just basically press edit, you can modify any parts of these that you already have set up. One thing that is important to mention is about the study duration and participation period. As we talk, they basically specify how long every participant has to be in the study. But when the participant joins, that start and end date is set for them. So modifying this here is not going to change the dates for the previous participants. Those are fixed. So whatever you modify here will be applied only to the prospective participants. For the current participants, we'll discuss how you can adjust them. But yeah, so basically you have to keep in mind that if you basically come here and say instead of 3 days, it should be 4 or 5 days. Oh yeah, I can't go more than 3 days because it doesn't fit between these 2 days. I can just say 29th, and I can go up to 6. But even then, for the participants that are already part of the study, this will not have any effect. I'm gonna set to 26th and 3 days. Good. And also it shows you a warning here that says when you're done with the modifications, you don't forget to update participants' devices from the adherence page. The same way you can modify the data sources as well. They're all listed here as mandatory, of course. You can delete or add new ones as you want. One important point here is that if you delete a data source, it doesn't delete the data for that data source. So the data still remain in the system. You need to by design, we made sure that there's not an easy way to delete the data or modify the data that's already uploaded. This makes sure that the data cannot be accidentally removed. So if you just simply remove this here, for example, I remove the Bluetooth data source here. It doesn't collect Bluetooth from participants anymore, but the previously collected Bluetooth data will not be removed. I'm gonna still add Bluetooth because we will need it. Okay. And as I said, a couple of considerations is that Ethika doesn't store different versions of the study. So any modification is final. If you modify it, that basically becomes the current version. The data analysis can be complicated if you have currently enrolled participants, because you have some that have some type of data, some that have a different type. And it takes time depending on your sample size and their demographic, how often they are online. It can take time that all these changes are propagated to them. And if you want to basically apply the changes to the current participants, the current participants app periodically checks if there is any new update. That happens usually once a week or so, depending on whether they're online or not. But you can request this to happen right away for one participant or some participants. You can, for example, I don't believe we have any participants here.
I added myself.
Sorry?
I added myself.
Oh, as a participant?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't show up.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I was in the invitation. Yes, you're right. Thank you. Yeah, so here you can see that there are two participants, 1336 and 13231. I can just come here and say modify participation period. And as I said, this is because if you want to modify the participation period for this participant, just changing that template period doesn't apply to this person. This person is already part of the study. That participation period and participation duration and a study period only applies to the future participants. For this, you can come here and say, I want to modify this period, and for example, instead of 24th to 26th, I want it to be some other date. I can't go more than 27th because that's the end of the study. Yes, sure.
So when you're doing that, because that's something I've run into, do you have to do it one participant at a time, or is this with where you are right now? Sorry, it's just a little hard for me to see the screen. Is it, if you're, for existing participants, is it one participant at a time to lengthen the study, or can you do it en masse?
No, right now it has to be one participant at a time. We actually haven't had we never heard the need to do it in bulk, and the reason was that usually the period that you specify on this page, it's basically the period that you want for every participant to be in the study. If you want to modify it, you probably have something in mind for every individual for a reason. For example, the participant was, I don't know, like one case was commonly happens that the participant's traveling and you want to extend their study period for another 2 weeks to cover for that time that they're away. That's why mostly the use cases we have seen is case-by-case basis, is editing one by one. But one thing that I actually like, I'll talk about it on Wednesday, is I'll talk about the features that we are going to add for the next 6 months. But I also would love to hear some comments and feedbacks that how we have to modify the system to make it more useful. So if this is something that you have in mind, I would love to know. But right now, to answer your question, right now the only option is to just modify them one by one, and you can just change it, for example, 23rd or any other date. We were talking about the updating, applying the changes to the current participants, and you can request the update to happen as soon as possible. To do so, you can just say update device for one participant, or click on the menu here and say update all devices. And it just tries to initiate the update on all participants. One thing so the way that initiating the update works is that the app or the server tries to send a message to the app and asking the app to perform the update. We will talk about when we talk about surveys and other parts of the system. There are parts that the server sends a message to the app to do something. For example, to remind them that, hey, you haven't uploaded any data, or to ask them to open a survey, or to basically ask them to update the study. The technology that's used here is a best effort method. It's not a guaranteed delivery. If they are online, it works immediately after. We will try it. You will see that you will receive a notification right away. But if they are offline, or if for any reason the message can't go through, well, it will get lost. It happens, I think, in 95% of the time, or 95 or 96% of the time, it will go through right away. But in 4 or 5%, it will stay in the network for up to 4 weeks to reach them. If it doesn't go through, then, and that's why it can get complicated if you want to modify the study that already has participants, because you apply it, then you have to make sure they receive it right away, and it can get a little tricky. Participants also can refresh the study on their own. Like we will see in the app how they can update the study. Okay. I was going to show the app interface. Well, we already have a few people signed up in our study. That's a very easy recruitment for us. But yeah, well, so how to enroll participants? You can basically use one of these 3 methods. Okay, I went a bit ahead. Either use the registration code, or the study's website, or the QR code. That basic QR code is a QR code that points to this website, which they can open on their browser. Okay, I come here. I do have a smartphone simulator here that we can use to. Okay, so I do have the app installed here as well. I'm just gonna click on it. If I go to sign up, okay, I probably should have, yeah. I'm gonna talk about this, and then I want to talk about sign up, because that's something that we have talked a lot with other people who are using Ethica. If you use the URL, they can open the page on their browser. It will show them. It will show the website that's created for the study. This website is created automatically. So when you set up the study, and this website is also created for the study. Now for us, it will be this page. I can just open it here. Yeah. So because this is a browser, it detects that it's running on a computer, so it doesn't suggest joining the study. But if it was, if when we open this in on a smartphone's browser, it detects it's on a smartphone and it offers the option to participate. I think I can do it here. I can just come here and go to browser and type the address. What was the number? 780? Yeah, thank you. Okay, because I have the app installed, when I opened that link, it automatically went to the sign up page here. But if I didn't have the app installed, say for example, I'm gonna uninstall the app. Okay. Now if I go to the same URL again, you see it opens that page and also pops up a dialog and says, do you want to participate right now or do you want to learn more? I'm just gonna say I want to learn more. You can see then the click here to participate option is at the bottom. When I tap on it, it doesn't do anything because it's simulator, and simulator doesn't have Google Play to download the app. That's why it just stops here. But if you do it on the actual phone, it will go to the App Store. You can download the app and then come back to the login page of it. And because the simulator, now I have to go to the dark side to install it. Sorry for that. I think it's here. I think the install was. Okay. Okay, now the app appeared here again.
So that would be as if they downloaded it.
As if they went to the App Store.
Or App Store.
Yeah, or Google Play and download it here. So I'm gonna sign up. Before I go there, QR code exactly does the same thing. This QR code points to the same URL. So if they scan this, it's likely clicked on that. It simplifies, so they don't have to memorize or write down this link. They just can scan this and go to that page. So in the first page, we ask for very few information: first name, last name, email address, and password. For some, well, this is very common for systems that they do require participants to have an account to ask for this information. First name and last name, well, it's mandatory to complete it, but it's not required for people to enter their personal information if they don't want to. You can instruct participants not to use their actual first and last name. Email address, it has to be a valid email address, which again can be tricky if you don't want to collect any personally identifiable information from participants. So if it's not an issue, you can ask participants to use their own email address. If it is an issue, you can use a catch-all email address, and that's what I just suggested Erica to do. What we suggest doing is that you can create an account for that study, like for example, mydemostudy@gmail.com, and then you can have multiple aliases for that email account. If you basically add plus and then any number after that plus sign, still will be a different email address, but will be captured in the same inbox. So you can ask participants that you register with mystudy+001@gmail.com, mystudy+002, and so on. This way you don't have to ask participants to enter their email address, and of course the password. The challenge here is that if you do that, if they want to change their devices, if they get a new smartphone, if they want to change their password or anything else, they just have to ask you as the study staff, which can get a bit overwhelming, especially if the sample size is larger. And when they join, Ethica assigns a unique ID, which will be used to tag all the data provided by them. You probably already have seen when I was going through the IDs here. Okay, so we have quite a few IDs, all starting with 1300, 13,000. And when we go through the data tomorrow, when we look at the data that we have captured, you will see that so data is every data record will have a user ID, which will have this number. Okay, so here I'm just gonna join the study as well. I'm gonna type my name, email address. I use my personal email address here and my plus. It's not, you can't easily read it, but because I already have used my personal email address to create an account, I use it +02. So as a different email, and here I can type.
So this will send to your email address?
It will send an email to my email, this email address, m.hashemian+2@gmail.com. But because this is basically my email address, it will be received by me. There are some tricks in Gmail that you can use. For example, dots are not considered as a character. If you remove a dot, it's a different email address, but still it's your email address. You can use some of these to create a catch-all email address and use that. Yes?
So the basic idea is you're using this plus 001 or +01 trick to basically allow you to give what is sort of nominally a new address here.
Yeah, I think there's a part of this, yeah. So in our documentation, if you go and search for catch-all email address or anything else, it brings up that page that talks about this method. I think it's here, yes. So that during the sign-up, you can use this, and links to an article that talks about this in more detail. You can just go there and search for this. There's more details there. Okay, now just signed up. I'm gonna now if you have, we will talk about the surveys in the afternoon. One of the surveys you can have is the eligibility survey that basically is used for screening participants whether they are eligible to join the study or not. Our study doesn't have any survey. That's why you could just join and there was no interactions needed. But if the study does have eligibility survey, it will be shown as soon as you try to join the study. Here I'm just gonna enter the study ID here. It was 780, press find. It immediately takes me to the registration page. If we had an eligibility survey, it would take me there and it would ask me to respond to that survey first. And based on my responses, either I would be eligible to go to this page or not. We'll talk about the details of how this survey basically evaluates the responses and basically determines whether a participant can join or not. Now assume we are eligible, then they come here that they see the study name, the organization name, the timeline for them to join the study. This is specific to the participant, but basically it's the same time that we see here. Basically they join from June 24th and they will be part of the study until June 26th. And this is the participant's time zone. Like we had studies that people are in different time zones, then for every participant it will be in their own local time zone. Yes?
So for some individuals, I'm seeing there is no last recorded data.
Yes.
Why is that?
We'll get to that actually literally in the next slide. So let me see. Yes. So one thing that I should say that by this point, we don't collect, up to this point, we don't collect any data from participants. Only because they haven't provided consent to join the study yet. The only exception is that some data on operations, basically some logs, to see what's going on, if there's any issues in the system we have to resolve it, and data on how many people viewed this consent form, and responses to the eligibility survey. So this helps with the tracking of how many people tried to join, who was eligible, who was not, and for what reason. Not who, but like why they were eligible, why they were not. Okay. Now for some people, like there are already some data because the app has tried to upload the first set of data, but for some of them there's still no data. It can be because of two reasons. Either because they haven't provided their permissions that are needed. We'll talk about that basically in this slide right now. If the permission that the app requires is not provided and people decline those permissions, the app will not operate as we expect. But overall, the data is uploaded usually once every hour, and so probably maybe their device hasn't really reached that point to upload the data yet. The permissions in Android and iPhones are different. In Android, Android, we don't need permission to issue notifications to participants, but in iPhone, we do need to ask permission to notification. And some people tend to say, no, don't send me notifications. If they refuse, if they don't grant the app permission for notification, press don't allow, the app will not function properly. And always show a notification that please consider granting this permission. And we will see that the report that will be sent that this participant refused the notification permission. But that's a permission that's required for iOS. It's actually trickier in Android. In iOS, at least they ask upfront that a participant can say yes, allow, or don't allow. In Android, by default, in Android, by default, apps have permission to issue notifications, but participants can go and revoke that permissions, and the apps won't know that they can't send notifications. And that's why sometimes in Android, when people say that we don't receive notifications for the surveys or for other things, that can be because the person declined the notification permission in the app. The other important notification is for GPS. This is like in Android before, it was either you could give notifications for. Sorry, I got confused. In Android, you could either grant GPS permission or you could revoke it. In iPhone, there were a dialogue like this with three options. You could say, I don't grant it, I grant it as always have permission, or I grant it only while using the app. The systems are going towards a direction that are getting a bit more, the providing users with more options and making this permissions a bit more tight. Right now, Android has 3 options just like this. iPhone has 4. So the list is growing. Now in iPhone, I think the new one that will be released in September, you can choose only while using the app, yes, but just this one time, allow always, or don't allow. So these 4 options. I don't still understand what does that mean, that yes, but just this one time, but apparently it's another option that they have. The point being that they need to provide this permission for Ethica to be able to access GPS. And it's very important to say always allow. I think the reason is clear. If you want to collect GPS data, you don't want participants to always have the app open to collect GPS data. And if they say only while using the app, it's basically the same as don't allow. Because we don't expect participants to always have the app open in their screen, right? Another thing that is important in iPhone is that I actually just got another question for that this morning, is that if people are, if you intend to collect any type of data, you need, the app will ask for GPS permission. And the reason there is that Apple in general doesn't allow applications to run in the background and do anything in the background. So when you press the home button in your iPhone, the application is completely closed. Unlike Android, that when you press home, the application still has the option to run in the background. There are 4 exceptions there. I think one is that if your application plays music, if your application makes phone calls, if your application connects to wearables and other peripheral devices. The 4th one is that if your application provides GPS-related information, GPS-related tasks. So that's why we ask this we ask for this permission, even if you don't ask for GPS data. For example, you design a study that the only thing that you need is screen time. You just want to know when people turn on their phone, when people turn off their phone. This still needs the app to be running in the background and keeping an eye on these things and record it. But because this is not a category in Apple's books that apps can run in the background if they want to collect the screen time, we basically have to ask for GPS permission to run in the background because of that reason. And then, but in that case, we don't collect GPS data. We just use that permission to stay alive, and then in the background, and then we collect the screen time data. So it's a bit confusing. You need to make sure that participants understand that when the app collects the screen time, why it asks for GPS data. I've seen it in other applications in iPhone as well. The applications, for example, right now, of course, iPhone has its own screen time feature, but before there were apps that were tracking the screen time, and all of them were using this trick. They would ask for your GPS permission, and they would use that to basically collect that data. Yes?
I just had a question about the issue with the Android phone and the fact that you have to ask this in the background, otherwise it won't collect. So if you
In iPhones. That's the case in iPhones only.
on the iPhone, yes,
Yes.
right. But if you had an option where someone did choose only use while using the app,
Yes.
and your study, you continued with your study, and you were collecting GPS data.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd obviously have holes when
Yes.
they didn't have that. So how do you deal with that from an analysis point of view?
So that's a very major hole in the data. I don't think if we can handle it from the analysis side, but what we do with the analysis to cover for missing data, because if they say only while using the app, probably we will have data 5% of the time or less. And the missing data is 95%. And it's really hard to compensate for that 95% if you only have 5% of the data. But if we do, there are other cases that the application can be terminated. We'll look at it just in a couple of next slides. That can cause a smaller portion of data being missing data. Like for example, if they terminate the app accidentally, they get a notification, but if they don't pay attention to that, there might be a couple of hours or maybe a day or so that the data is missing. Then you end up with 80% or 70% of the data out of 100%. Then you can compensate for that 20-30% of the missing data. Nate, I believe he will talk about the analysis work that we can do to compensate the missing data.
That's right. I mean, with respect to GPS, there is some interesting analysis that can be done, if you only, even if you only do it while they use the app, in the sense of, Ethica has another feature for example, geotagging, surveys.
Yes.
Or, you know, and if GPS is on, even if they don't give continuous permission, if while they're using the app it's on, you'll essentially get GPS localization around whenever they're answering surveys, or engaged in like time use data entry.
Yeah.
Or there's a set of these extensions, you know, chatting or
Yeah, just
other things. Those things will have data, like GPS data, which could be of interest, particularly like where they're undertaking certain activities. So basically their self-reported data will at least be lent GPS, and that can be significant.
Yes.
But, you know, if your interest is more generally where are they engaged in higher levels of step counts in the course of their day without them being involved by self-reporting, that will be an important gap.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. Here when we say GPS, this is a GPS data source that continuously collects location data while the participant is in the study. But also when we look at the surveys or other activities that we are adding, you can choose that capture participants' location while they're performing this activity. For example, would be capture participant location while they're responding to the survey, or capture participants' location while they are doing this time use activity or anything else. In that case, they are interacting with the app, and the only permission we need is only while using the app. As long as we have this or this one, which is a superset of the first permission, the data that's being uploaded will be geotagged, so we know they have done this activity at this location, at this geo point. But we will not be able to collect GPS data while they're not using the app, which if that's what you need for the analysis, there will be a major gap there. Yes?
Can I just double check that I understand correctly? If I'm not collecting GPS data with my study and a participant who sees this screen says that they only allow while using the app, does that mean that the app can't run in the background?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so this is, I can treat this question as actually being about GPS data for participants?
So this question is about staying also operational when you close the app.
Okay.
So we need this for the app to stay operational when you close the app. But if you collect any sensor data, we only use this to stay operational and collect that sensor data. We don't even we do have to read GPS, but we set the GPS to be very, very coarse, and then we discard that data that we get. But if you do collect GPS data as well, we both use it to stay operational in the background, and we use it for collecting GPS data as well. This is becoming like one of our main focus, not this particular screen, of course, but this practice of staying alive in the background and operational, because the operating systems are an Android alike and iPhone. They're going towards a direction to allow less and less applications to stay operational when the participant is not interacting with them. For example, in iPhone, it's easy. At least Apple provides a handbook and say, you do this, it works. In Android, every manufacturer has their own practice of dealing with them. Like the way that Huawei handles this is different than the way that Nokia handles this, is different than the way that Xiaomi handles this, and so on. So the app tries to at least detect the kind of phone that you're running and then try to instruct participants. I believe I have a screenshot of that as well. That on a Huawei phone, you have to go somewhere and give the certain permissions for the app to operate. So I try to show all the pitfalls that participants' app might not work, but we'll get the reports on all of them. But overall, this is just a small subset of the cases that we might not get the data. In most cases, as we see on Wednesday, we will have a substantial amount of data from the participants. So to answer Rifat's question about like why the app is not uploading, if any of these permissions are revoked, that also can be a reason that the app does not upload the data that we expect. And I think that you can appreciate as the type of data become more sensitive and more protected by nature, like for example, app usage and call and SMS logs, the steps that the participants have to go through to provide that permission is a bit more lengthy. For example, for so far, only the person had to just tap on allow, and it would work as expected. But for app usage, it's they need to provide there's a permission here that's not, the button is not shown here. They need to install a separate application that if they tap on it, they will be taken to the App Store to install an application and then provide a certain permission for that. Similarly for call and SMS logs, this is not available in iPhone. Applications cannot have access to that. But in Android it's possible, but the steps that they have to go through is, all of them are plotted here. So basically first the app asks them to give the permission to install apps. Then they will if they tap on this button here, they will be taken here. There's a switch that they have to flip. And then they will go back to the app, says, okay, thanks. Now the next step, you have to install the app itself. Then they tap on this button, they will be taken to this page and says, Android asks them, do you want to install this app? They say, yes, install it. It says, okay, done, I installed it. When they press done, they go back to the app, says, okay, now give us the permission to capture SMS logs. And then when they press permit access, app asks, Android asks, this app wants to access your SMS logs. Would you allow it? They say yes or no.
So Mohammed, I have two comments on this. So the first thing is, in the Ethica help system or community site or documentation, is there a central table which lists for what data sources, and I think it's a small subset, you have these questions that come up?
I think there's only three that they need, the three data sources that need permission. One is GPS, the other one is app usage that we talked about, and the last one is call and SMS logs. The case for web-based data sources that are, like for example, for Google Feed, Fitbit, and those ones are a different one that we don't discuss it here right now, but at the moment. But I don't think if the website right now has exactly this information, the documentation. This is something that we have to add there.
That probably would be good, so people when choosing these can know this is encumbered by, extra questions to the participant about to give permission.
Yes.
The second thing, and related to this, if a study were to want call and SMS logs, to me, a sequence like this suggests that a study like that in terms of recruitment and going through the consent process and starting them up in the study, getting them going, probably should be done in person so you can help walk them through this.
Yes. Yes.
And potentially even with their permission, you could take their phone and just go through it.
Yeah, that's definitely the best way to manage it, to make sure that participants know the steps that they have to go through. Two things that we can do and we're working on our end to simplify it is first to have better reporting systems. So if any participant doesn't go through these steps properly and one of these permissions are missing, so you can see it from the dashboard that, okay, this participant hasn't provided this permission, that's why the app is not operating as expected. And the other one is to simplify the screens that are on our end to make sure it's a bit more clear, the steps that they have to do. In this list, the ones that are the dark screens are the ones that we manage. The first one, the third one, and the fourth, fifth, sixth one. But the other four screens are managed by Android. So this is completely out of our control. Like they always, not our platform, any other platform capturing this type of data, they would need these permissions to install this system. But we still can do a lot of help with better communicating with participants what are the steps that they have to go through. But because there are so many of them, there is a high chance that they might get lost in the middle if you just rely on them doing that. Yeah. So I press register here. Okay. You can see it just as soon as I press register, it just asks me for GPS permission, for call and SMS logs, to go through the steps for call and SMS logs, and also for installing the app usage. It doesn't, if I tap here for download, it doesn't work. I believe it takes me to this page, but if I press open in Play Store, yeah, it doesn't work. Because it's a simulator, it doesn't work as expected. But I believe you already have gone through it, and we saw the screenshots as well.
So basically that's because you're not running it on a real phone.
It's not a real phone, so it doesn't work exactly the way that it should. But maybe this one, oh, well, I can ask for GPS access, and it says, do you want to allow? Say yes, do allow that. Okay, there is the setting here that I wanted to also mention. There are a couple of options. One of them is the data upload setting, upload via Wi-Fi only, upload while charging. We talked about those two, and the notification for Android. This is also something that's very confusing. What is the sticky notification? It's basically a notification in Android that allows the app to always function in the background. It's the name, they call it sticky because you can't get rid of it. If you use an Android phone, you're familiar with these kind of notifications, that it's a notification but you can't really dismiss it, unlike the other ones. Actually, like, all of them are the same. Yeah, so this makes some people like annoyed. That's why if they want, they can turn it off, but if they turn it off, probably the app's not gonna provide as much data. So a lot of other apps, like for example Fitbit app, or like other apps that need to communicate with a peripheral device like a wearable in the background, they also use the same method, use a permanent notification to always stay on. If you do have, for example, a Fitbit, you will see that they also have a notification that you can't dismiss it, because that's the practice in Android to make sure an app is always running. And we talked about update studies, that how participants can initiate study update. The button for that is here in the app, but that, well, it's in case if they press this, they basically initiate the update on their end to refresh their study settings in case there has been any changes. There is the option to drop out of the study in the interface here. If we go back to the app, if I go to the About study and press Study Settings, here I can drop out of the study. And of course, participants can always drop out of the study by just uninstalling the app, and we wouldn't even notice that. But if they choose this option to drop out of the study, Ethica marks that participant as dropped, so it's a bit easier to manage the data on our end, on your end as a researcher. And also, if there is any dropout survey is defined for the study, they get the chance. Well, they are asked to respond to that. Of course, they can cancel that as well, but they may complete it. A couple of other points about the app. As I said, the app works offline. The only thing that they need to be online for is downloading the app, of course. Sign up, study registration, receiving the study updates, and withdrawing from the study. Other than that, they can be completely offline for the study period, and it works without any disruption. The app's interface is available, I think, in 7 languages. We are adding these 2 within the next 3 or 4 months. But we can add, we can extend to other languages as necessary. So if it's necessary for having a different localized interface, we can do that as well. I think there are 3 interfaces here. Some of them, like Urdu and Farsi, are more challenging because the interface is actually right to left, so everything has to be mirrored when it's presented. But that's taken care of. This is the interface of the app. So all these messages and texts and so on. But when you are designing your study, if you have participants, for example, in here, if you have a study that runs in French and English, or in US in Spanish and English, you need to define the study content, of course, for that separately. Right now, the only way for that is to either have multiple studies, one for French, one for English, or one for Spanish, one for English. And you also have to duplicate your surveys as well and modify the text. That's very cumbersome. This is also something that's right now in progress to just, we hope that by the end of summer, you can just enter just the text in multiple languages, and depending on the language that participants choose, that text appears for them.
You might want to note REFOD here, if you raise your hand. REFOD has an example study which is in a language, Bengali, which is not included in that list because the Ethika interface isn't in that language, but she has content in that language mixed with an admirable number of sort of multimedia components and pictures and so on. So if anyone is interested in seeing localized content, but in an Ethika interface which remains in English in that case, REFOD could show it to you. That's for a Bangladeshi study which will be launching, I think, pretty soon.
We talked a lot about the background data collection. Just a summary on that. One thing that I forgot to mention that's good that's written here, actually surveys is an exception. So even if they terminate the app and do everything, and there is a survey scheduled at a certain time, they still receive a notification for that. So they will be notified to respond to that. And when they open the app again resumes data collection until they terminate it again. And, or if they don't, they will continue collecting the data. If they terminate the app accidentally, like I don't have an iPhone simulator, but if you're an iPhone user, you know that if you press the home button twice, it shows you all your apps and you can swipe it away. If you swipe it away, it immediately terminates the app. And the app can't do anything. One thing we are doing, we show them a notification that say Ethika is paused and Ethika is stopped. This can't impact your study participation. Tap here to reopen the app. The only thing that they have to do is just to reopen the app for data collection to resume. But if they discard this message, well, the app remains stopped. And the challenge here is that the app is immediately stopped, and it doesn't tell us that, well, the app is stopped because the participant terminated. So it's a bit hard to manage it then.
So quick question, if their phone were to restart, or if there at some point were to shut down their phone and
if they shut down the phone and open the phone again, it'll still resume all the pending applications that were running before.
Yeah.
So restart doesn't terminate it. The only thing that terminates it is if they press the home button and they swipe the app away. In iPhone, I've noticed iPhone users some of them have habit of just clearing their the clutter and just removing all the apps. That can terminate the app.
Right.
Yeah, but that's the only case.
If subsequent to that, it will remain terminated, even if survey application, no survey will pop up.
No, the surveys will pop up even if they terminate the app.
Okay.
That's what I was doing.
The survey will pop up.
Yeah, surveys don't require the app to run in the background, but any of the other data sources require, oh yeah, I haven't written here. Even if they terminate it, the surveys will be presented still.
And if they interact with the survey, though, the app itself
Will resume.
will resume.
Yeah, we'll resume the operation.
Okay, so when they next interact with the survey, it will resume the operation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, similarly here, we talked about that the sticky notification required the app is required for so app can run in the background. A notification like this will be shown all the time. GPS is not needed for background operation in Android. A sticky notification can keep the app running, and app settings may require for some phone. Yeah, so and the additional settings may be required for some phones like Huawei. If you have a Huawei phone or some other phones, some other settings can be done. The app shows a notification if it's a setting that, if it's a kind of phone that we already are aware of this issue, we usually program the app so it detects that it's running on that kind of phone, so it messages the participants based on that. Yes.
So a question about you mentioned on the previous slide about the iPhone that you can force stop the app. Does the same notification pop up on Android? Because I know you can do that on Android as well, just clearing your...
No, if you that's the thing. In Android, terminating the app the way that you can do in iOS is a lot trickier. In iOS, if you In iPhone, if you press the home button, swipe the app away, it's completely terminated. In Android, if you do the same thing, just that screen that you see is gone. The app is still running.
Okay.
For terminating the app, you have to go to settings and then select the app and go somewhere else and say that I want to forcefully stop this application.
Okay.
And that's what I didn't mention. If they do that in Android, if they go to the setting and they choose the app and say I want to forcefully stop the application, nothing then works in the Android. The surveys don't prompt are not prompted either. So
Okay.
it completely stops the application
Until it's restarting.
until they open the app again.
Or the phone is restarted.
No, even the phone is restarted.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because the app is, and well, in technical terms, the app enters in the fully terminated or force stopped state, and then stays in that state until the participant opens the app again. Yeah.
Okay.
When it comes to the surveys, we talk about that how you can configure the surveys to send text message and also email for notifications. Those are sent through the server, so they these issues won't apply to them. So during the setting the study, you might want to send reminders at least in via text messages or emails to respond to the surveys. But they require the email address or the phone number of the participant to be validated. Yeah, and that's what I want to talk about. The web-based version of the Ethica will operate exactly the same as we talked about. Because it's a web-based, it's still the work in progress. We expect that it will be done by the end of summer, so I didn't include it in these slides. But a few things that you have to consider is that it can't collect sensor data because it's a web-based application. It can't run always. You close the browser page, it's gone. It can't issue notifications. The notifications are sent via email or SMS. So basically, you can have a study that say, well, I want to send experience sampling surveys like every other day, but the notification should be sent via email, and the participants don't even have to have the app installed. They just get the email, they tap on the link, they go to the website, respond to that, and then close the website again. That was all about the participant app. I'll just go through a couple of pages here that we have. Yeah. So you can see that except for 2 participants, for the rest we already have some data collected for these 9 participants that we already have for the study. So we'll look at the sample studies as well. There are a few of them that Nate can talk more about each of them, the theory behind designing each of them. But just to go through the pages that you have access as a researcher on the left side, the basic, in the design section, the basic page shows the basic settings of the study. You have the list of your data sources, and of course here in this page you can add any surveys that you want. We'll talk about in the afternoon that how you can create surveys of different type and configure it and so on. The beacon mapping is, I'll get back to this after going through the other pages. The participation, if you, the invitation section here, you can invite participants, and this is not only for those who are, for those studies that are invitation only. Even if your study is public, you still can invite participants to join. If it's invitation only, they only can join if you invite them. If it's public, they can join whether you have invited them or they have tried to join themselves. Here in this adherence page, you can see a list of all participants and some of the other reports on the data they have provided. For example, if I click on this participant 1336, you can see the participant is using an Android phone of this kind. We don't have any accelerometer or GPS or Bluetooth data for them. But if you, for example, click on this person is using an iPhone device, iPhone 6 Plus. It's been in operation all the time. We have accelerometer data from them. We have GPS data from them as well. We don't have any Bluetooth data because Bluetooth sensor is not available in iPhone. So because this person is using an iPhone, we don't even expect to have Bluetooth data.
That's not Bluetooth beacon data.
That's not Bluetooth beacon. I'll talk about the data sources and what each of them mean tomorrow, so we can look at the data as well as we go through them. This Bluetooth data is different than Bluetooth beacon. Yes.
So iPhones can access or provide Bluetooth beacon data?
They can access beacon data.
Okay.
Yes, but they cannot access. And actually, Bluetooth data in Android is also becoming more challenging. In Bluetooth, we rely on a unique ID, which is called the MAC address. If you try to pair two Bluetooth devices before the name shows up, sometimes you see a random number. That's the ID that we rely on. And to make sure this participant, to uniquely identify each device that we see. But for security reasons, smartphones right now randomly change that number every now and then, and that's why you see this number right now and the next day you see another number. It's the same person or the same device, but it comes up as a different device. And you know that you can't put your phone in always scanning, always discoverable, your Bluetooth device, and that also impacts it. That's why using Bluetooth to capture the contact pattern is not a good practice. It was a good practice when we started at 2009, but it has changed. So
Mohammed, you did, forgive me if I missed it, but you did show the pause button or snooze.
oh no, that was excluded. Yeah. So one thing, I didn't go through the list of data sources. That's a very good point. I'll get back to that. Let me go through these pages quickly. So because also noon, we probably have to pause soon ourselves. Yeah, so the couple of other pages, one is data quantity report that you can create plot graphs on the data that's uploaded by every participant. We'll talk about this on Wednesday when there's more data available. And survey sessions, which basically shows the survey that participants have responded to. I have to check that why the page didn't load here. And then, because we don't have any surveys. I'm just gonna add a dummy survey here. Yeah. So here, if I go to the survey sessions, basically I can see the expected survey times from every participant and whether they responded to or not. The sensor data, you can either export the data, or if there is a location data, we can plot them. We will plot them here later on today and tomorrow. And survey data that you can either just see the responses from participants, or you can plot them in the map. Plotting surveys in the map uses the geotagging of the survey of the surveys rather than using the GPS data source. So you can have a study that doesn't have GPS data source, but you can configure it to geotag all the responses. Then only that permission that while using the app will be enough to collect the data, to have the GPS, to have geotagged survey responses. That will be used to show the responses here. And the Kibana, which, as Nate said, we'll talk about this tool in more detail on tomorrow and Wednesday. Tomorrow we'll just discuss this, that how we can use it to actually access the data and start looking at the data and how they look and so on. And then we will look at how we can use this to plot graphs on Wednesday. So that's about the design, participation, sensor data, and survey section. And this is the end of it. The only thing that I forgot to mention is that if you remember when I talked about adding data sources, I said that data source can be optional or mandatory. We set all of them as mandatory. That's why when you come here, you don't see any option to disable this. But if we would have set them as optional, if you want, you can try in your study, a switch will appear in front of them that participants can flip on and off. If they flip it on, it will be, that data source will be enabled. If they flip it off, it will be disabled. That's one way they can stop collecting a certain data. If they don't want to provide GPS, they can just flip that off.
And that switch will stay, let's suppose they disable it, that switch will stay disabled
Indefinitely.
Indefinitely.
Yes. That switch stays disabled indefinitely. But more than that, if participants want to pause all data collection, they can open the app and press pause participation option here. The resolution of this simulator is not really good, but it reads as data collection is paused. It will resume in 59 minutes, and it will basically pause all data collection for an hour. They still receive notifications for surveys if there's a survey that they're supposed to respond, but that's it. We don't collect any sensor data in this case for another hour. After an hour, it will resume, and I think it prompts a notification as well that it's resumed. If you want, you can pause it again.
So this provides them a way of disabling collection of all automatically collected data, the data that would be automatically collected
Yes.
for an hour. It does not pause them getting surveys prompted to them.
Yes,
Although they can always elect whether or not to fill those out.
correct.
Previously you had showed a way that if a data source is marked as optional, they could disable it. And you noted that once disabled by them explicitly, that optional data source will stay disabled.
Mm-hmm.
By contrast, the pause, when they go and invoke it, first of all, it will stay disabled just for a defined time, here an hour.
For 1 hour, yes.
And secondly, it does so for all the automatically collected data, the data sources that would normally be automatically
Yes,
collected.
for all data sources. Yeah.
For all data sources.
Yes.
So there are sort of different levels of granularity. One is more fine-grained temporally. The other is more fine-grained in terms of which particular item you wish to disable, but it remains that way.
Correct.
And they will have a notification when it is disabled temporarily. With that red, it will go away after an hour.
Yes. So just one, I understand we are behind a bit, a few minutes. One thing to mention is that I skipped through this Bluetooth beacon. As I said, in this study, we want to collect all the sensor data and also capture the contact pattern of individuals. We do that using Bluetooth beacons. I have some of them in my backpack here. In my bag. So these beacons are battery powered. They are they work on coin batteries. They're like this big. You can program them with you need three unique numbers to assign to each beacon. And what they do basically is that they constantly broadcast that number. And so then the phone, that data source that you added, listen to the number that this broadcasts and writes that down. And based on that, we know that the person, for example, my phone was close to your beacon or someone else's beacon, just captures this data. And this way we can capture the contacts. But when you do that, you have to assign the numbers to these carefully, because, for example, if the beacon that I get to Megan has to have a unique number different than the one that I give to Erica or to Amira. So when my phone sees a certain number, I know who this beacon belongs to. It doesn't have to belong to a participant. It can belong to a certain object. One thing that we plan to do is to assign a number to a beacon and leave it in this room. So then we see when everyone goes out of the room and when everyone comes back to the room. All these assigning numbers to the beacons and then programming them and handing them out happens in this page that you do beacon mapping. The interface is fairly simple. One number that you need is something called a unique identifier that's written here. That's the first number that you need. The other numbers that you need, you have to say that I want to add a new beacon, that whether it's owned by a participant or it's not. So if I want to give this beacon to a participant, I can flip this as yes, this is participant owned, and then it asks me, so which participant? Here I have the list of all participants. I can say this belongs to participant 13257. And then I also have to specify 3 attributes. I'll talk about in the afternoon that what they mean, but I think it's also fairly clear that, for example, here we have one team. One setting we can have is that we can have one team because we don't want to divide individuals into teams. And then we can have, so all of them can be part of team 1. And the roles, if the beacon we assign it here, it's going to be a role room. That's one role. It can be a role instructor, TA, and attendee. That's going to be 3 other roles, so we can have 4 roles, or any other setting that we might have. If we do that, it gives us, so for example, assume that I say the team ID is 1, the role ID is 1, the subject ID is 1. I say add. It gives me some numbers here, like of course, this is the unique ID of the study, and then the name of the beacon, and the major value, and the minor value. These 3 numbers, these four values actually, this 3 and this unique ID, is exactly the same values that we need to program these beacons and then hand them out. I'm gonna probably spend part of the break after this to program the beacons so I can give it out to people. We'll go through it probably a bit more later on this evening, this afternoon, and also tomorrow to see exactly how programming this, or configuring these beacons work out. We can do that, and yeah, and then we can collect the data and check how they look. Yes.
Do you use beacons, or is there any point to using beacons if, again, I'm just thinking about a specific example, if I care about where vaping stores and or products are being sold, and they're in gas stations or everywhere across the city. I would imagine that, I mean, one thing, I could have these beacons and place them at every gas station I went to, and they may or may not get tossed in the garbage can if somebody found them. But could you also set up a beacon location that could be identified then by any of your participants in a study if I wanted to know someone who came close to Petro-Canada on 8th Street, can I not construct that beacon without using that beacon? Do you know what I mean?
I believe so. I think I understood what you meant. I don't think if it's possible to, the solution you suggested at first, that's the only way we can do if we want to use beacon to capture participants' proximity to certain locations. Whether it's indoor or outdoors in different places, it's still the same approach. Indoor is a lot better to use, well, it's a lot more reliable to use beacons. The reason is that GPS, especially indoor or places that are densely constructed, it doesn't work very well. But so you can program beacons and you can put them at different places in the building, different rooms, hallways, and so on. But in placing them at different gas stations, it's a bit trickier to manage that because gas station is an open area and it's fairly wide. Beacons have the advantage is that they run a very long time on the battery. I think they run 2 years on a single a cell battery, but the problem is that their range is very short. So, and we'll talk about how we can estimate the range based on the RSSI value of the beacons. But the range is short, and if you put one beacon in the gas station, there's a chance that they, I don't know where the product is sold, but you can put it in the convenience store in the gas station. So if they enter the building, they probably see the beacon. But if you put it elsewhere, they might come to the gas station and their phone might not pick up the beacon. That's actually something that we'll talk about tomorrow, that how the beacons can be scanned.
So it'll be like dozens of meters.
Yes, there are very different kinds of beacons. Like there are some that are as small as this, and there are some that are as big as this one. And these ones have a wider range because they run on 4 AA batteries, so they are stronger. So you can increase their transmission power. So when they emit the signal, they cover a wider range, but they're easier to spot. Easier to be stolen or damaged. The battery dies faster. So depending on the design, it might be a better idea to just use GPS. For example, if you're detecting the times that people visit the gas stations, probably GPS is a better option because gas stations are usually wide space, open, and GPS signals are picked up very well.
Yeah, and I would say in general, this is a good dialogue to start, and I think it will follow us through the event. In general, detecting proximity with a beacon, whether it's person to person or person to place, is often an alternative to, or it's something to consider as an alternative to a GPS-based mechanism. A GPS-based mechanism works particularly well outside. Inside GPS, like a large building, put aside homes, small, sort of normal side residences that are single family dwellings, those GPS will get to. But in a building like this, if you're in the more interior areas, GPS is going to be really spotty in its availability. And if we want to spot, two people are together, you wouldn't want to rely on GPS if you really want to know how close are they. Similarly, my proximity to this table, probably a beacon would be a great solution. Something like an outside location, GPS is probably a very good alternative to beacons. You could use a beacon in that regard, but often we would say, well, it's outside, so the GPS signals can be very strong, probably quite reliable. It's a bit noisy, but it would be fairly, solid in terms of figuring out where people are. We'd say that person is near that billboard or the gas station ad, the vape, the vape list of products that are promoted at that store. We wouldn't know if they're a couple meters away like we would with a beacon, but we know if they're in that proximity pretty closely. Yeah. I would say, it's always helpful to go back and forth and say which is the best fit for this job. We often use beacons also for mobile things like dogs or milk carts in a long-term care facility or something else, things that move around and where GPS therefore isn't a very good marker for them.
Okay, sorry, we're around 15 minutes over.